Thank you very much. Everybody here. Good evening and welcome to the Scituate Planning Board, Thursday, December 11th. Held in the select board hearing room here at Town Hall. Also available, we have a hybrid meeting as always. There was a posted agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's our 6:30 PM. This is our zoning bylaw and stormwater bylaw workshop. The zoning bylaw updates and changes for the 2026 annual town meeting, including definitions, update to table of uses, WRPD, which is the Water Resource Protection District, in section 600. It amend the stormwater bylaw to incorporate MS4 changes, which is we have to do by the state. All right, thanks for Justin.
Yes. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna start by going through the zoning bylaws. We're gonna do each zoning bylaw, we're gonna do them section by section. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is add a new definition, section 200. We decided after reviewing the zoning bylaw that it would be beneficial to have a definition of modular dwelling unit. Definition is straight from the regulations for accessory dwelling units.
Okay,
So it's straight from the state.
we have to read it.
No, I mean, it's up
Oh,
on,
it's up here. Hold on.
it's up on the board, so I think everybody can read it. It's, you know, it's the state definition, and we just thought that it would make sense to add it since the AG broke out our stuff about trailers in our bylaw.
Any questions from the board, any comments? You see this, okay, is anybody in the audience? Yes, Mr. Gilpin.
Steve York, just for the record, so this is any size building that can be habitable as long as would be a single family dwelling, so when they get into zoning for tiny homes and stuff like that, this is gonna cover that as well, there's no size limitation in this law.
It's not a tiny home. A tiny home has a separate definition.
Separate definition.
And the town has to, a modular dwelling unit is a modular dwelling unit. And so if a tiny home would satisfy that, it would satisfy it. But tiny homes have to be accepted by the town. And tiny homes are not accepted by the town. They're not designated in the town of Scituate.
So but there's nothing in this definition that exempts a tiny home, so that's my point, it should say something.
No, because this is right from the state.
This is straight from the state.
And the state says that this does not include tiny homes.
Right,
No, the state does not say that.
That's
The
right.
state does not say that.
Okay.
anybody else? I'll vote.
Madam Chairman,
Oh, yes, oh, hi, Bob.
I just want to input on that a little bit. The building code has restrictions on room size, ceiling height, inspections, various other aspects of the requirements that would be difficult, if not impossible, for a tiny home. At least the typical ones that we are seeing and thinking of, in the news, online, whatever, really couldn't be met by those.
Thank you.
All right, so that's modular dwelling unit, the definition.
All right.
Most of the changes that are occurring in the bylaw are a result of, it's housekeeping, most of it. Some of it is housekeeping. We're going back and we're finding things that were incorrect from MBTA, ADUs, and just incorrect things in the bylaw that we're trying to correct all at once. So the table of uses. A single family under A1, single family attached dwelling. That's not allowed in the DBP. B, a two-family dwelling subject to 430.1 in the VCN. NRN, it's not allowed. It is allowed. It is allowed. Accessory dwellings subject to 530, they are allowed by right And we kept the special permit because if you have an ACDU over 900 square feet, it's gonna require a special permit. But the majority of accessory dwelling units are going to be by right, unless you have a larger home. Childcare facility, line M, childcare has to be allowed in every district. Not that they would be in every district, but they have to be allowed. Live work building, it's not, number N, not allowed, we're changing it from yes to no in the NRN. Mixed use building, technically you can have a mixed use building in the harbor under the village business overlay district, and that's a special permit. And a mixed use building is not allowed in the NRN.
So all of those things there's all of those different zones in town, so we have 14 of those, so it's not like just one size fits all, that's fine, okay? Lots of designations for all little areas.
The red is the changes.
Any comments? That's it? Okay.
The next one is a change under section 450, special provision applicable to all districts. We're adding a 450.5 construction site preparation standard. And it's basically, we're just reiterating what some departments are already, most of us are already doing, no site work until you have all your permits. So we're just putting it actually in the zoning bylaw.
The board, public? You know if there's anybody online, please? Nobody raised anything again? Okay, you're all set. Yeah, there's no- okay, next, Karen?
Next one is the Water Resource Protection District. This is a proposed change to change the non-disturbance buffer zone from 150 feet to 400 feet from the high water mark of the surface water sources outlined in 520.A and 200 feet horizontally from the edge of all tributaries in the watershed for the sources identified above. The state regulations for water quality standards list Class A water is anything having a 400-foot boundary, and then anything from it with a 400-foot boundary, and then 200 feet from the tributaries. So this article is gonna be sponsored by the planning board in conjunction with the Water Resource Commission. Does the Water Resource Commission want to say anything on the article?
Yeah, Bruce Arbides, 23 Dan Pasture Lane, also chair of the Water Resources Commission. I also want to mention that there's a wording change that needs to take place in the section 520.2 finding.
Okay.
In the buffer zone. Now the wording change is 520.4 buffer zone. The change is we're removing the wording Tack Factory Pond, and we're adjusting that sentence to say to refer the surface water sources outlined 520.2A above. There's a wording problem with the current bylaw, where in the definitional section up front correctly identifies all three components of our reservoir system. Tack Factory Pond, Old Oak Bucket Pond, and quote unquote, the reservoir. But in the buffer zone, it only talks about Tack Factory Pond. That's incorrect.
And we've removed that.
The red is the proposed wording.
Okay.
And you can see the strikeout. Which is Tack
Yes.
Factory Pond, yeah.
So I think you have a hand raised.
Yeah, Link Heineman. Do you want to recognize him now?
Yes, Mr. Heidemann,
Let me get him.
I'll be up on picture.
Should be unmuted.
Yes, Mr. Heidemann, how are you?
Hey, good evening. Good. How are you? Thanks for being recognized, Madam Chair. So just a quick question about this. As far as not allowing the removal of any vegetation, I'm just wondering, was there any thought to exempting the removal of invasive species? It seems like a legitimate reason to remove vegetation. Just wondering if there's any consideration of that.
We haven't thought about that. We can do research on that between now and the public hearing in January.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Anybody else? Yes,
Yes, for the record, Gregory Morse, 167 Tack Factory Pond Drive. It was referenced earlier that the state standards are 200 feet from a tributary and 400 feet around the reservoir. That's true for what they refer to as the Zone A. The Zone A allows construction. You're allowed to install buildings, you're allowed to install parking lots, you're allowed to install drainage. This is specifically about a non-disturbance zone following that state Zone A. That's a much different standard than non-disturbance. Scituate has a 150-foot no disturbance zone today. That's the way it's been for a long time. To bump that out to 200 feet on the tributaries and 400 feet from the reservoir impacts an awful lot of property. And a non-disturbance buffer zone, if you read this bylaw, is exactly that. You're not allowed to do anything. Not just invasive species, you're not allowed to cut your grass, you're not allowed to do anything. And I'm looking at specifically when you come off the rotary onto Country Way, the properties on the right-hand side, so the yoga studio, the general store, all those properties there, those are currently outside of the 150-foot no disturb. They would all now be within the 400-foot no disturb. It encompasses a total of approximately 10 acres of land, which per your new zoning, MBTA zoning, it's 15 units an acre. That now prohibits the construction of approximately 150 units if it's to be treated as a no disturb zone. Where does that put us with respect to the MBTA numbers that we have to maintain?
The MBTA numbers are strictly zoning. Our zoning is approved.
This zone is going to specifically go directly against it and prohibit the construction of those units because this is a non-disturbance buffer. I think the board needs to take that into consideration. The second question I have is, under the 520.2 findings is a reference to the Old Oak Bucket Pond. I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the town pursuing a new withdrawal directly from the reservoir so the Old Oak Bucket Pond would become an abandoned source? When is that new withdrawal going to be expected?
I never forget. Mr. Albanese?
Yes, the town is looking at that. However, what I've been told is they would use both as needed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I got a couple.
Oh, okay.
The language in 520.4A talks about that non-disturbance zone. And it references the areas in 520.2 above. 520.2 above, especially 2A, talks about tributaries. And I think we need to be careful that the wording If the intent is 200 feet from tributaries, that it's not interpreted as 400 feet from tributaries. And lastly, the bylaw is silent with respect to existing conditions within the non-disturbance buffer. Again, coming off of the rotary, all of the houses on the left-hand side, all of the houses along Aberdeen Drive, Jenkins Place, there's hundreds of houses impacted by that non-disturbance that already have disturbance into the buffer. I think the bylaw has been flawed in that way. It really doesn't speak to it. Maybe we could make the bylaw better and actually speak to those conditions. What are those people allowed to do? My input.
Yes.
Hi, John Barry, I'm not a Scituate resident. I was actually in town hall today having an informal meeting, chairwoman and Mr. Joseph about 7 New Driftway. You folks are, I'm sure, aware of the address. It's a permanent site. It's in the Gateway Greenbush overlay. It hasn't been developed because the permits as they stand were kind of uneconomic. So I've looked at it as with a new kind of a clean slate and had conversations about how we could go about living within the spirit of the bylaw, doing it as a by right project. And so it came up today during this informal discussion that this meeting was happening tonight to talk about the new watershed protection. Sometimes bylaws get adopted and things are missed in terms of the implications. So there are there's a lot of real estate along the Driftway that's going to be impacted. This site specifically, if this is adopted, at least based on the way it's drafted right now, would have a direct impact on the viability of that site. That's a almost completely impervious site right now. It was built probably 60 years ago. It was a medical office building. The proposal that was approved and my concept for the property would be to dramatically reduce the impervious, work with the existing structure as much as possible. But that would be precluded based on this new overlay. So I just want folks to understand the language that's currently being proposed is going to dramatically impact some of the redevelopment projects that have been incentivized by the town because the new overlay bylaws, the density proposed by the MBTA at the state level for smart growth, commuter-oriented housing. This kind of goes against all of that momentum to create more density, walking distance to the commuter rail. So I don't currently own the property, but I would imagine the folks that have owned it for a long time, that have been prepared to their property to sell and be redeveloped. It's kind of a land taking. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but it just doesn't seem right that in a matter of weeks, that property will go from being a viable redevelopment site, which is a gateway property for the town, to being really undevelopable, given this bylaw change.
So I'm confused.
All right, so what I will do is I will speak with town council and, and get his opinion on what the state regs say and what it does and what this bylaw says and if there's a problem.
Because Mr. Morse, it does specifically say it's 200 feet horizontally from the end of our tributaries, which over seems to 520.28. From the high water mark of the surface water, which is Jack Factory, but then it says specifically 200 feet from the tributary.
It does, but that first sentence there, it says, from the high water mark of the surface water sources outlined in 520.2A above, and in 520.2A above, it includes tributaries.
That includes tributary, okay.
That's
I
right.
get it.
Is that a tributary that,
Could you
oh,
identify
sorry,
yourself,
yes, Freya Schlegel, Select Board, is that a tributary going behind that property, or doesn't that go out to the ocean?
please? So that's what I'm confused about.
Is that classified as a tributary though, if it's leaving?
Yeah.
It's not classified as a tributary. What it is classified though is the DEP Zone A, because it's a 400-foot horizontal setback around the actual reservoir, around the Bulldozer Bucket Pond.
Okay, so it's not
So
about.
it is down gradient 100% from the water source, but it's included in that Zone A.
Well, we do have a question to the town council about this, we got something on the wall. Yes, sir.
Steve Bjorklund again. As you guys change a lot of these bylaws, you always talk about trying to do it in line with what the state's doing. We have to do this because that's what the state does. I just heard Mr. Moore say that the state does not have a non-disturbance buffer zone. They have a buffer zone that's regulated. And I don't think you're gonna see as many arguments if our bylaw actually said you can go to 200 feet, you can go to 400 feet, but instead of prohibiting stuff, regulate stuff instead. So you could just take out the words non-disturbance and prohibit it, and I think everyone's gonna be all set. And that will treat people who have held vacant land forever. They can come in and they can meet new regulations, which anybody else that's redoing the house would have to meet the same thing. But the problem is with all the stormwater stuff that everybody's gonna meet now, I mean, it's becoming impossible to do anything in these areas.
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Bill, there's two librarians sitting in this very room, we spent approximately 8 hours looking at this stuff, trying to figure out the difference between buffer zones and zone A and zone B, and I'm gonna leave this up to town council, we totally hear what you have to say.
So you could mention to town council what would happen if we took out the words non-disturbance and just regulated everything in those areas, which is what DEP is really looking for.
Well, like I said, we know that this is outstanding right here with the town council.
No, I've briefly mentioned it to town
Okay.
council. I mean, I said it might be an issue
Okay.
and that I have to talk to the Water Resources Commission first before we really involve town council. I would recommend to the board to reduce the 150-foot buffer. But I mean, maybe Mr. Bjorklund has a point about, regulating in the 200 and the 400, but I wouldn't recommend taking out what you already have in the bylaw.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
John Berrigan, could I ask the representative from the Water Resources, is he still in here back?
Yes.
Did you understand the implications of it when you folks were preparing this change? Did you understand the implications on the overlay district and any redevelopment?
We understood there could be some impact. Our expectation was that we had to meet up with the state requirements. The big requirement issue is the thing that we're gonna review with town council to define exactly what is a requirement and what is something that this particular bylaw, which was set up in 2014, what was done on a local basis. So we will review that.
So I guess if I can glean through it, you folks are looking to align with the state law. And that's what Mr. Bjorklund will talk about, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if in fact the state did not have a non-disturbance zone, and that wasn't the purpose of the buffer, but it was more to regulate rather than to prohibit, would the Water Resource Commission look at it again and support removing the words non-disturbance, if that's in line with the state? And you probably have to go back to the committee to
Yeah,
find it out, but as developers, we would look for the support of that, if that aligns us with the state. That solves some problems. Because there is so much regulation, you're gonna be able to control this stuff. But to just prohibit it, to me, it just doesn't make sense.
And I think it's important to point out that, everybody wants clean water, so it's, there's been tremendous, in my 40 years in this business, the advances in technology and engineering and requirements and thresholds with respect to water quality, when it comes to stormwater. It just got a new law was adopted this past fall. So we're continuing to clean up our water and do it in a way that we should. But I also think there's always that balancing act of people have property rights and to just take them away, it just doesn't seem to be fair or right. And I think if we can amend the bylaw so it aligns with the state and have additional mitigation, it's the appropriate way to enforce it.
And that's why we have these open meetings, so we get everybody's input. and then we go back and we digest it and produce something else.
So I just wanna say that the bylaw was changed in 2014. We had a water resource protection district before that. It was done with working on with the DEP and John Clarkson, who was a member of the town who worked for the DEP, in order to obtain our water withdrawal permit. So it's, so we have to look into.
I would say, why would you relax what you already have? If the issue is from 150 feet to 400 feet, maybe that's the area that could be more addressed with, but why, again, the primary objective of this thing is to protect our water resources, right?
Correct.
And so why give up on that had already been addressed in the past? If there's an issue to look at, I'll defer to the legal review here. If there's an issue to look at that has some language around, permitting work inside the 400 feet, I would just say that it would start at, 150 foot mark to 400 and leave the non-disturbance buffers at where it is.
Right, and the bylaw already does that. The bylaw has restrictions of how much impervious area you can have in the zone A, in the zone 2, and, overlapping zone A's. And that's all in the zoning bylaw right now. You're allowed, 2,500 square feet, one of them you can have infiltration, you can go more than that. That will not degrade the water quality. Then there's another category, maximum 20% impervious in zone A. That's already spelled out in your zoning bylaw.
Just speaking to this.
Yeah.
Non-disturbance buffers.
We'll look into it in the next month.
What is not hearing?
Just one final comment on that,
Promise?
on this particular bylaw. So Steve, really what you're saying is if it's already in the bylaw, it shouldn't be changed.
We changed it before
Okay,
to.
so, but if that's the
we
case,
changed-
if that's the
Can I
case,
finish?
why are we changing
Can I-
all these
can I
other things
finish?
in the bylaw?
Can I finish?
Sure.
Okay. Changed it before to provide more protection for the water resources.
Okay.
The objective here was to say, can we align with what the DEP and what the state is requiring as well? Well, we don't have to do exactly, we can be more restrictive than the state. We already are. So the issue is if we want to address something out to 400 feet, which is where the state is going, I said that's the area we would look at.
Okay, but the comment was it's already in the bylaw, so keep it there. But all these other changes are things that were in the bylaw that we're now changing. So using the fact that it's already in the bylaw
No,
as a basis.
you misunderstood what I said. You misunderstood what I said. Right.
Exactly.
This was an attempt to look at our current bylaw and say, can we align it with what the state requires? And in areas that I think are possible, from 150 feet out to 400 feet, it's possible to look at that. I would not backtrack on what we've already addressed.
I don't wanna beat a dead horse, but, in talking about that, the Water Resource Protection District already expands well beyond the 400 foot, it expands beyond the zone. These are all like interior of that, so when we talk about regulating between the 150 and the 400, you already do that under the guise of the Water Resource District. It's just that non-disturbance setback, so.
I get that.
I said, we'll digest all of this and we'll do some more meetings that help with this. This is not the one I know meeting. Anybody else? Something new? Okay, what's next, Karen?
The next section is table 1, in section 580, allowed building types in the BCN district. We're changing in the NDTV district, we're saying that a cottage court is not allowed in NDTV now, because That's your mandatory mixed use district, and the cottage court is not a mixed use.
No, there isn't. Everybody hear that? Yeah, but it was not one, okay?
All right, the next one is section 610.1, lot area and width requirements. It's been said that the bylaw was a little vague in saying that all required lot area must be contiguous. So all we're doing is just clarifying that all required lot area needs to be contiguous. Just a clarification.
Yes.
Where's the vague part in this?
I didn't think it was vague.
It's not.
Other people
It doesn't
have
have to
said,
be contiguous.
other people said it's vague, and so so that there will be no confusion, we have opted to make sure that there's no confusion.
So it's not a small issue here. I mean, it's very easy to say that it does not have to be contiguous. This is a big change. So it's don't do it under the guise that this is something simple and it's just that we're fixing something. It's not vague, it does not say that it has to be contiguous in the existing bylaw.
Yes, it
You are
does
not-
under B.
It's under B, it does, yes.
Under A, okay, it gives you your lot area, okay? So
We did that circle thing?
under B, oh, this is the new change.
Yeah, we did that circle thing.
No,
Yeah.
So
it's already in B.
It's already-
It says we're changing buildable to required.
shall not be counted towards the buildable area. That just makes it more confusing. All right, we'll go on this side. I didn't get that figured out yet.
And Karen,
See, that does help.
so, okay. Next.
Next is clarification on building height under 620.1. It already says in the zoning bylaw that in a residential district, you can go to a maximum height of 40 feet to the highest point. So we're just clarifying that under the first paragraph. It's already in the third paragraph down. We're clarifying that in the business district, you get a maximum of 45 feet to the highest point of any roof or ridge. And the same thing in the VCN. If you remember our definition of height, height is measured from the average grade. So the average grade to the maximum height is 40 feet. And so now this is saying what the current practice has been, that's to the midpoint in the gable. You obviously have a higher point to the peak of a ridge.
That took me a year to understand. But lots of people tell me how that works.
The next one is 620.3, setback and yard requirements. Okay, we're proposing to change the rear yard depth in the R1 and R2 district to 15 feet for one-story detached accessory buildings, 30 feet for all of the buildings. This is because of ADUs. ADUs require the least permissible setback.
And this came directly out of our adoption of the ADU bylaw.
Right, this came out from ADUs,
Something
and
that
so
we
we're
brought.
trying to minimize impacts to abutting properties.
So everybody, yes?
Totally agree with you.
Thank you.
There you go. Good job.
Geez, thanks.
All right, the next one is a modification to 620.4. We're adding a new section B, and that's, you have to remember the sections. And we're basically saying that at-grade construction of patios, anything over 12 feet, can go to the property line, provided that drainage doesn't leave the property. Decks over 12 inches above grade, including balconies, stairways, and landings, shall meet the requirement of the preceding paragraph. That means they can't project into the setback more than 18 inches. And so rebuilding or repair of the stairs and landings shall not be allowed to create a new nonconformity where none exists, and should not be allowed to increase the nonconformity.
So this also arises from some recent building.
And complaints
And
that we've
complaints.
received.
Yes, Mr. Green.
The comment that I have on this, I did have a chance to talk to Bob today about this for a little bit. There are a lot of people that have first floor decks, but generally if you step out of your family room, you're gonna be a couple of feet out of the ground because your foundation's gonna be out of the ground, obviously. And I would make a suggestion that instead of it being 12 inches, it'd be 36 inches. And that's my comment. I understand what you're trying to do. You don't see second floor decks looming over people's houses. But right now, the bylaw does allow for decks to go up to the property line. And I think it's reasonable that, I mean, you can put a beam underneath it, you gotta put 2x10s or 2x12s and decking on top. So it basically, they'd be maybe 2.5 feet out of the ground for a first floor deck. And I think it would be reasonable to change the 12 to 36.
Mr. Vogel?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point and probably valid. It would also allow for things like a front stoop and, 3 or 4 steps going down to grade. Typical house, perhaps the first floor is, as Steve said, a couple of feet above the typical grade. So I think that's probably a reasonable change, very honestly. I would say that if there is a dimension, it probably should be 30 inches because that's the dimension that the building code allows you to not have a railing if you're 30 inches or lower. So anything above 30 inches would need a railing. So that might be a good cutoff point to think about.
That makes sense.
So does the board want me to change it to 30
Does
inches?
that make sense?
That makes
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, we'll change it to 30 inches.
It's the difference between doing a patio on the ground and actually just a small elevated deck.
Okay, so you're saying 30 inches, Mr. Vogel?
That's the building code cutoff again. Above that, you need, if it's greater than that, you would need to install a railing. So I think that's a good number to choose.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So are we changing it in both places?
Yes.
Decks over 30 inches above grade, including balcony stairway, shall meet the requirements of only 18 inches into the setback. Right, so that's the proposed zoning changes that that will be legally advertised and put on for the spring, for the public hearing in January 8th and your spring town meeting.
So this is not the last time we discussed.
We will do some more research on the Water Resource Protection District.
How does everybody feel about that?
And good.
Yes, I can move on. Yes.
All right, so the next one is we're revising stormwater general bylaw. Again, this is you revised the stormwater regulations in October. And so what the approach that we took to revising the bylaw is we're trying to comply with the MS4 requirements, and we're trying to do some general housekeeping. Right now, our bylaw has stuff that really belongs in regulation, We just fixed our regulations, so that's why there's some deletions in the bylaw to take out stuff that's in the regulations. A bylaw has to go to town meeting. Regulations can be changed with a public hearing. We also have added some stuff in the bylaw that was brought up in the public hearing last time on stormwater regulations. We got in some 80% thresholds and some lots, undisturbed lots.
So I'll be a compulsory reading.
Correct, yes. You have the PDF? Great, yeah, so,
Would you like that displayed?
please, yes. So my name is Nick Cohen. You might remember me from 2 meetings ago. I work at Horsley Witten. We've been doing MS4 permit and other stormwater work with the town for a number of years. My colleague Michelle was here the last meeting. I was not, and Michelle and I have been working with the town on regulations and now the bylaw for the last several months. A lot of what I'll talk about today is a refresher, so I'll try to go through that relatively quickly. But I think for some of the new faces, it's probably helpful to just bring everyone up to speed on where we're at and what the process is, some of what Karen just went over. So if you go to the next slide. Or the next page. There, perfect, thank you. Yeah, so this is what I'll go over tonight. The first 2 or 3 topics we've already talked about, the MS4 permit in general and stormwater, the required bylaws under the MS4 permit, just a bit of a recap of kind of where we were a few months ago in terms of Scituate's existing stormwater regulations at the time and the stormwater bylaw, and then go through the process for updating the bylaw like Karen was alluding to, leading up to a January 8th planned hearing. And then the idea being to bring an updated stormwater bylaw to town meeting in the spring.
Because they were doing this because we are not in compliance right now, right?
Correct, yes. So the regulations were updated in October. I believe EPA confirmed.
EPA confirmed that they were fine.
Okay.
Right, but in terms of kind of the regulatory structure, without a bylaw, the regulations don't really exist. Bylaw needs to catch up to the regs, for lack of a better term. So tonight's opportunity for discussion and some initial feedback leading up to that January anticipated hearing. Just a quick kind of stormwater 101 here. Again, we're talking about stormwater, which is different from wastewater. Stormwater is water that flows over surfaces like roads, parking lots, and gets into the nearest water body, generally untreated, unlike wastewater that's usually treated by your septic system or a wastewater treatment plant. In Massachusetts, we have the MS4 permit, which is Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit, quite a mouthful there. That is the permit that any municipality like Scituate has in order to operate and own a stormwater system that catches the stormwater and releases it to water bodies. The permit has 6 minimum control measures. Those are often referred to as MCMs. You can just kind of think of them as the categories of requirements in the permit. They range from things like public involvement all the way up to the municipality's own housekeeping activities that it must do to keep the stormwater system in a state of good repair. The bylaw is under MCMs 4 and 5, which I've kind of just highlighted on the next slide. So that's the categories we're talking about when we talk about the stormwater bylaw. And there are requirements for both construction site and post-construction stormwater management, with the idea being that those are sites that contribute or have the potential to contribute to stormwater pollution, and so they need to be regulated by a bylaw at the municipal level. I know we've talked in more detail at previous meetings about what the requirements are, so I'll go through this more quickly, but if folks have questions, I can come back to it. Generally, the permit requires municipalities to have a bylaw that regulates a site, construction site or a development site of disturbing 1 acre or more. That's the threshold that's set in the permit, and that's where Scituate's existing bylaw and regs were lacking a little bit of that overarching threshold. There's also construction site stormwater requirements for managing construction waste, controlling erosion, other things on the construction sites, and then requirements for post-construction for things like stormwater performance standards, operations and maintenance plans, and other requirements for sites after construction. I'll just note here too that there's kind of 2 sets of requirements, post-construction and construction site. Generally, those are usually addressed with one bylaw, so for the purposes of Scituate, you can just think of your stormwater bylaw and stormwater regulations as addressing both of those topics, but technically there are two sets of requirements. And hopefully not to confuse things more, but typically municipalities like Scituate do have both a bylaw and a regulations. Like Karen was alluding to, the bylaw sets kind of the general framework, and then the regulations typically provide the details that accompany that regulatory framework with more of the kind of nitty-gritty aspects of processes and things like that. This is where we were as of a few months ago, and now with the updated regulations, things have changed a little bit, but the bylaw needs to catch up to that, and I'll get to that on the next slide. First, though, just kind of a refresher of EPA reached out to Scituate and noted that the bylaw and reg were not in compliance, needed to be updated by the end of this year. The idea at the time was that the regulations could be updated more quickly to bring Scituate into compliance as fast as possible, and then the bylaw would be able to follow behind that. On the screen here is just kind of the list of a summary of the things that Scituate's bylaw was generally missing. It addressed some aspects, but it didn't have all of the water quality performance standards. It didn't have that overarching 1 acre threshold that I mentioned, and it also didn't have some of the requirements for impaired water bodies that are specific to a given municipality. As Karen was also alluding to, anytime you open up a set of regulations or a bylaw, it's an opportunity to clean up some issues or add additional issues that the town would like to address. So that was done with the regulations, and there's some other opportunities here in the bylaw to match those up and address some other concerns that the town has raised. So as I've already been alluding to in the process, the regulations have already been updated. We're now working to update the bylaw. We have a draft bylaw for review, with the idea being we have public input tonight, public hearing in January, and then bring a version of the bylaw to town meeting to clean up the process or complete the process, at least this phase. So at this point, you might be wondering, what are those changes? On this slide, I've tried to summarize with a couple bullets kind of the types of edits we've made. Of course, the details are in the edits themselves, but just for reference, there are non-substantive cleanup that we've done just to kind of clean up typos and other confusing language or places that we need to just match things up with the stormwater regulations. There's also been places where there was duplication with the stormwater regs, and places like Karen was alluding to where it's better to just let the regulations speak for themselves and have the bylaw be a little bit cleaner for flexibility. So one example of that is we use the term stormwater authority more generally in the bylaw, and then let the regulations define how the stormwater authority works out, which allows for some flexibility in defining the process of regs, or in the future, if you wanted to change that, it can be changed in the regs, because the bylaw just says there is a stormwater authority, and the regs define how that works. There's other examples like that, that's probably the cleanest one. We've also made updates to amend language to match the stormwater regulations. So despite what I just said, there are places where you do want the same language in both documents. Topics like definitions or applicability thresholds you want to match up between the two documents. And then getting into more complex or more detailed changes, there is an addition of further review, coordination, and documentation for projects in the water resource protection, which was a request from the town, and I think an issue that came up in some of the other conversations. And then an additional 80% threshold that Karen was alluding to a minute ago is for projects that don't quite meet one of the existing thresholds, but that are 80% of one of those thresholds. There would be an additional review and documentation process to just check those projects and ensure that they are not, in fact, meeting or exceeding an applicable threshold. And then last but not least, there are additional modifications for applicability, including bringing those new developments on previously undisturbed sites into the review process under the stormwater bylaw. So that's an additional change that would be in the bylaw beyond what is currently. So that's a lot to go through. I'm happy to go back and talk about more specifics or answer any regulatory questions. Obviously, answer questions from the public or from you all about kind of where we're at or what's in there.
Awesome.
I mean, if you want, we can go page by page
Yeah, you wanna do
through
that.
the bylaw so that everybody gets a chance to understand what we're doing and ask questions if they have questions on what's proposed.
Take it away.
All right, so on the first page, the we're, you know, it's some of the definitions, we'll break, some of the definitions we didn't have in the bylaw, some of them we're making the same as the, regulations. That's basically all the definitions, so, okay, that takes us through page, 3.5. You know, we tried to make sure the definitions all match each other and meet the required ones for MS4. I mean, you know, we didn't have erosion control, you know, plan and stuff like that. So we had to spell that stuff out to meet our MS4 requirements. Section 4 is applicability.
Hang on.
Okay.
I guess, last one.
Hey, I'm Nick Tomasio, Chairman of the Bylaw Review Committee. The whole committee's here, so we're trying to wrap this all up together.
Okay.
My first comment is on the definition of impervious surface. This is a grammatical one, it just doesn't read well.
Okay.
Down near the middle where it says this definition of impervious surface to be used in calculations to determine jurisdiction, should there be something else in there of the bylaw?
Yes.
Okay, that was it on that one. And then if we go to the next page. It's actually on page 4. What we've done is actually deleted the definition on a change, but then added it back in on a change. Well, I don't think that's necessary to show. It could add for confusion. Stormwater was the definition that was already in there. But we go down.
Wasn't in alphabetical order, so we put them in alphabetical order. That's why
Oh,
it's
is that why
crossed,
that's-
that's why it's
Oh,
crossed out. because
okay, got it.
we have to show all the changes to be totally
Yeah, I got it.
transparent.
I'm okay with that. Thank you.
And comments, Mr. Mills?
The definition of impervious surface in this bylaw is different than the definition of impervious surface in the zoning bylaw. I wasn't sure if you should coordinate the two of those. That was one item. The second item is resource area definition. It takes any area protected under the Wetlands Protection Act. You know, I think resource area is meant to protect the wetland itself, for example, but under the Wetland Protection Act, you also have a 100-foot buffer zone to a wetland that is a protected area, but it's not really a resource. So I wasn't sure if the definition of resource should be changed to specifically identify wetland resources and not their buffer zones.
Is that not covered by referring to the particular acts?
So under the act, the Wetland Protection Act, you have the actual wetland, but also the land protected is the area within 100 feet of said wetland. The wetland is what's considered the resource, not the buffer zone, which is the land. So I think there just needs to be some clarification in that.
Well, it says any protected area under the Wetlands Protected Act. Is
Which
defined
includes-
as a resource area, so it seems like it includes.
Says any area protected under, including without limitation, the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, Rivers Act, or Town of Scituate Wetlands Protection Bylaw.
So it would seem like it covers the buffer zones, the river, you know, the river buffer zone and all that.
I guess I just wanna know
It'd be
that,
good to clear out.
is that the intent to cover that buffer zone as a resource area when it's intended to be just a buffer zone?
I think that was the intent because it's about where the jurisdiction is, whether it's Conservation Commission or Planning Board. So we can check with Karen and the town about where this actually comes into play in the
Yeah, this is what it's referred to.
Anybody else?
Just, another typo under impervious surface. On the second to last line, it says in the preamble component, can them be considered? Should be them.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that strange one when you're talking about the definition of new development and redevelopment. In the definition of redevelopment, at the end of it, it said redevelopment is any such activity that does not meet the definition of new development. And in new development, it says any alteration, construction, or any disturbance of parcel of land in a natural vegetative state. Should it say any activity that doesn't become a redevelopment one? Or is there any reason to have that sentence in one definition and not the other?
I can speak to that from a permit perspective. So in the permit defines new development and then uses the language of anything that isn't new development is redevelopment. So it's a bit of taking Scituate's existing definition and tacking on the permit requirement for that consistency. Anything nuanced beyond that would be a town choice of kind of how to thread that needle, but that's why the something that isn't something else language is in there, because that's how the permit defines new development.
It's just only on one or the other.
Exactly. Yep.
So stop shooting both.
Change that out in Glasgow.
All right, section 4, applicability. We've added, we've changed the applicability a little bit here, based on comments from Mr. Morse. You know, so any new development we've added has to have a stormwater permit. We don't care if it meets the threshold. If it doesn't meet the threshold, it still requires a stormwater permit. We have a lot of sites. We have some sites in Scituate that have recently, they've just been disturbed and they didn't require stormwater permits and they were disturbed and, you know, they're in sensitive areas. So and they're few and far between sites that are totally treed. So we put that in there. We clarified the language in number 2 and we cleaned up some other language in applicability. That's under A. We cleaned up a little bit of stuff in exempt activities as well. We added a C, projects meeting 80% thresholds. We have a lot of projects that apply for building permits that come in at 23.9% impervious and 14,990 square foot of disturbance. All this is saying, if you're 80%, give us a staking plan. We're gonna hold you to that in the end. And I will tell you, we know of instances where it's been exceeded and people got away with it. So we just want an itemized breakdown that goes, you file it with your building permit and, you know, so that the building department knows, and we all know it didn't need a stormwater permit, but this is really what you're limited to. And then projects in the Water Resource Protection District, I mean, this has been a sensitive area in the past where some projects, the building commissioner felt that maybe they need perhaps a little bit more review to make sure they're meeting, you know, the Water Resource Protection District required, and they may need some stormwater measures too.
So how this stuff comes about is that we get plans and then things fall through. So for every project, we learn something on every single project, and that is reflected in usually zoning bylaws. Yes.
Sorry, but went through this quite a bit. On the section applicability, section A1, just a minor comment about, is it necessary to repeat the definition that we defined in section 3?
we do find it usually clears up a lot of problems.
Okay,
They usually do what they want to do.
okay.
In this particular case as well, because of the new development can have a colloquial meaning versus as defined in this bylaw, it's an extra check, I think, to confirm that people are reading new development as it applies to this, not in the colloquial sense.
Should it just be capitalized? Capital. on the
It could be.
applicant to indicate that it's a defined term. That's kind of typically us.
My next comment would be on A2, A3, and A5.
Okay.
And I can start by looking at A2. It says all new development and redevelopment. We defined in A that if it's greater than 40,000 square feet or more, we shall be subject to this bylaw. So why would we put some things under there that are less than sizes than 40,000 for new development?
Well, the bylaw subjects you at 15,000 square feet. We had to put the 40,000 square
Oh,
foot in to
at
make,
least over, you still want to regulate less?
we want to regulate less,
Okay.
but the EPA wanted to see that we have the 40,000 square feet in there.
I got it. Okay, and that addresses those three comments. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Under C2, projects meeting 80% thresholds, an as-built plan by a land surveyor, can that say or a registered engineer? An engineer can make that certification.
We're waiting for it.
Under C2.
What did you want that to say?
Can it say land surveyor or engineer? An engineer can make that certification.
Registered professional engineer.
Registered professional.
Or a land surveyor.
So I'm to understand, we don't have a lot of land surveyors, is that true?
That's,
Yeah, I should come.
it's a problem in the state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or is there any more comments on that 5 administration? We just cleaned up pretty much, permitting authority and changed stormwater authority. Number 6, we changed shall to a may. So that's pretty much housekeeping stuff. 7, submittal requirements. We took out a bunch of this because it's in the regulations. And so if we want the bylaw to be the framework and the regulations, the specifics, we took it out of here because it's in the regulations.
And one other on submittal requirements, and maybe it's the copy of the bylaw that was used. But my latest copy has G, H, I, and J as A, B, C, and D.
Oh,
And I'm just carrying forward.
Well, they're all gonna be stricken anyways.
Okay, but we
Yeah.
wanted to show the change, that's all. Right? Change to section A, not G. That's all.
oh, I see. Oh, it started with G, I see. Instead of H. No, when somebody goes to
Section
choose the
5.
alphabet, should have been A instead of G. Okay, okay,
Just typical word thing.
yeah.
Okay. Performance standards, again, cleaning up the language there and taking out the stuff, the performance standards are in the regulations now, so it doesn't need to be in the bylaw. Okay. And cleaning up, changing permitting to stormwater authority. Section 9, review process. We clarified a little bit more about the pre-construction meeting, which is in the regulations as well. We talked about public hearing. And cleaned up a little bit about, stormwater authority. Section 10, we cleaned up, most of that's permitting authority. And surety, we cleaned up that language that, you know, surety we can put that in there, and we have some of that also in the regulations. And, we put in stuff about a stop work order, which is in the regulations too, under enforcement. Because the stormwater authority is allowed to issue stop work orders on projects and issue fines under the bylaw. Stormwater authority is either the planning, the town planner, or the conservation commission, or the planning board, or conservation commission. It depends on where the project is located. If you need a notice of intent, the conservation tries to do the stormwater permit, all upland stuff, it's planning.
That's what people get confused.
So that's the general framework of what we did.
Any questions or comments? Anybody online, Kate?
Yeah, I see hand raised.
Okay.
Lincoln.
Please. Hello.
Hello. Actually, yeah, my hand was raised from the definition section, but I know it
Oh,
didn't get
sorry.
raised, but that's okay. So the permitting authority, it's now the stormwater authority, correct?
Yes.
So
Yes.
can you go back to that section? Because I went over it quickly, but it looked like in some instances it was the planning board, in some instances it was someone else, but maybe that's different. It would be great just to.
Yes, in upland cases, it's the planning board. If you need a notice of intent or a conservation permit, it's the conservation commission. That's because we don't want everybody to have to do multiple permits.
Yeah. So this isn't actually, so can you go to the definition if you would, please?
What definition did you say, sorry?
What definition would you like?
I think it was on page 2 or 3.
Okay.
Whatever the stormwater authority definition is now, and how it's different.
That's on page 3.
Yep. And how it was
Yeah,
different.
okay, it's at the bottom, yep.
So the breakout of responsibility between conservation commission and planning board
It's
is
in the
within the
regulations.
regulations.
Is in the regulations, and the regulations haven't changed. What the bylaw says is within the purview of the Conservation Commission, and what is in the purview of the planning board. It hasn't changed. It's just gone to the regulations.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. How are you? We all set?
Unless anybody has any more we'll be taking
Comments?
We'll be taking comments. If anybody wants to send me comments, we'll take comments. The legal ad will go to the newspaper next week. And for a publication, for a public hearing on January 8th. Same night as the zoning. We're gonna do all the public hearing all together.
So can I ask you, if you do have comments, it's much easier if they're written, so if you keep track of them, as opposed to taking notes over the telephone.
When did you say you needed by? Did you say?
Well,
You give them the deadline?
No, I didn't give a deadline.
Well, I'm suggesting you do just because you want to have them all in before the public hearing.
Technically, we will post for we will post on January 2nd, or well, we might post December 31st for the public hearing on January 8th. So any changes we would need before that time.
December 31st.
Any, right,
All
so,
comments.
I'll comments before December 31st.
I mean, because then whatever changes we make, we'll post new stuff online on the planning board webpage so that everybody's working with the latest version for the public hearing.
Santa is not bringing us new stormwater, that's up to us.
So really by the 28th, 29th would be ideal if anybody has comments on either the zoning or stormwater.
We all set?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We all set to move on our agenda? We're not, I mean, it's gonna leave us down, good stuff here, okay. Good stuff. That's all.
I don't know. It's like,
You're, yeah, done, no. We're not gonna talk about zoning.
okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Blue cover.
You're saying there's no version of this?
Yeah.
Beyond
The
this one?
blue cover
Yes.
that the town clerk distributed.
Yeah.
2 weeks
Okay.
ago. Right now, meeting.
Okay.
Okay, we're moving along here, so we can, we're gonna vote to reappoint John Buckley to a new term on the design committee for a term of 1/24/2026 to 1/24/2029.
I move to reappoint John Buckley to a 3-year term on the design review committee for a term running from January 24th, 2026 to January 24th, 2029. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wow.
I think we're gonna get to Q.
So we have old business, new business, correspondence and all that stuff. So we can approve our minutes.
Move the minutes, planning board meeting, November 20th, 2025.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. So show us about some money.
I move to approve the following purchase order, 2605-295 in the amount of $600 for peer review services related to the project at 5 Laurelwood Drive. Number 2605-622 in the amount of $7.50 for an office supply. What was that? I don't know. 2605-683 in the amount of $1,467.12 for traffic review study related to 21 Central Avenue project. And number 2605-698 in the amount of $875 for printing of the revised zoning bylaws.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Does everybody have their two pink books?
Yep.
Yes.
When are we paying for typewriter rate?
That's in the budget, so you missed that last
Like
night.
a budget. I don't think there's a typewriter company to do the typewriter maintenance anymore, so we haven't asked for it. I mean, it's still in our budget, but we haven't called for typewriter maintenance.
I said before, sometimes you use it.
Absolutely.
People use our typewriter. People use our typewriter.
Yeah,
Actually, there is somebody, it was on Chronicle, some character that does.
who collects typewriters?
No, he repairs them.
He's in Cambridge, I think.
So, I mean, they.
You know, there's only one guy in all of
Really? Yeah.
South Shore who cares for grandfather clocks.
Scotty Sykes?
No.
No? Who?
It's, His name,
See
but he's
him?
the only guy with the phone.
What we put on the back of the door of the grandfather context, we can touch it when we need it. For liaison reports, if anybody.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, CBC. The character for, Mr. Mooney for the Cranberry Bog did not show up, so they discussed it a little bit, and I brought up the concept of upland bog as opposed to wetland bog, and then something that needs to be investigated. Just in the beginning, when the chair of CPC, when Dan Finley met with Woodrow and Kevin Cafferty, they were not gung ho on the cranberry bog and the water, because there's something like 600 or 60,000 gallons of water that flows out of their area every single day that goes out to sea.
Bruce just said it was 600.
Oh, well, what, add another zero.
That's a big difference.
It's a big difference, but at any rate, it's a lot of water. And it flows in just underneath the gate to Old Oaken Pond.
Or this is going out, right? It's
Yes.
not being.
Not being held up at all, it's gone up, which is really sad. It's really sad, but the thing is, Mooney wants to maybe build in some places, or this needs more review. So, more review. And then we also voted to rescind a number of different articles that 2015, 17, 21, 22. And one that went, but at any rate, we're taking back $247,985.53.
53 cents.
Yeah, that's 53 cents. So, they've been talking at the last meeting with, recreation about putting some type of exercise mat. And he withdrew it, and unless they can find a better place, it's not going in front of the old gate school at all, ever. That's done. Okay, so they have to find a new spot for it, if they can find it at all. And that's all I have to say about it.
I went to conservation, but nothing touches us. That did nothing first. So we're like, nothing concerns us. Anybody else?
CPA's AT. Which is when we need to.
Yeah, and we're at
We're at the ELC.
Oh,
Wanna write that down?
right now.
Oh, in the wrong place.
Well, we're gonna talk, so next, if I can start going.
Yep.
Next week, we have a continuance, so we need at least 3 people to show up for that. The question is, does the board want to talk about anything else, which is zoning and stormwater, before the public hearing on January 8th?
I think we should talk about the issue that was raised about the 400 versus
Yeah, I do too.
50
I don't
on
know.
that.
So then
And
we'll put
maybe
that,
have some mapping that shows how that's gonna work.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have,
well, we have a map of the Water Resource Protection District.
no, that shows the change from the 150 to 400.
Yeah, I will have to get, I had a discussion with Mr. Arborez today, and I said, the state law defines Class A as 400 feet and 200 feet from a tributary. Is that a non-disturbance buffer? And he couldn't find it in the regulations.
Okay.
I think it's just a definition. And so I don't think, not 100% sure they understood what they were doing when they put this article in. So,
We should just understand it, I think.
Yeah, and
I don't think we should relax the standard.
I
that we
agree
have
with you
now,
100%.
But if there's a way to address kind of the middle piece of 150 to 400 or something that has some other consistent standard with what the state has, that may be viable.
Right, so we have to try to look into that in this next week.
Yeah.
So we'll put a discussion about zoning and stormwater on for next week. Those are basically the only things that we have, so we'll put that on for next week.
I think that seems right.
Okay, I presented the budget, the other night to the select board. Our budget's pretty much been the same, it's just set salary increases This year, they totally took out the money for the assistant TA, director of planning and development. That's gone from our budget. So,
So that was short-lived.
The kid that was did it for a little while?
yeah, kid, I mean, it's just not funded. And I mean, they took that money and are using it, I'm sure someplace else, because it's a pretty tight budget year. All right, I approved another stormwater permit for another house on Carriage House Lane for a pool. So now we have 5 pools between Carriage House and Colebrook. Each stormwater permit goes like you did with the first one, they're totally peer reviewed, they have to, all the conditions, you know, they,
Carriage House.
And final.
Curtis Estates.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
So I've been approving these and they've been getting peer reviewed, firm stormwater permits. I issued a fine to the Hathaway School, contractor for construction. I've also issued a fine to another pool job that just changed the whole plan.
Good as that.
Without approval, so,
How much was the fine?
the first time you fine under the stormwater bylaw, it's 100, second, it's 200, the third, it's 300, and every subsequent, it's 300.
I
So,
don't think you can find more than 300 for bylaws.
right, so you can't find, right, per our brother, you can't find more than 300.
Yeah.
And so, as a result, you know, Toll Brothers got multiple $300 fines, you know, but, you know, it's the first fine, they get $100.
What do you do with the fund?
It goes into the general fund.
How do you know they violated
into our
our plan?
How do they know they violated?
How do you know?
I have the approved plan, then I get an as-built. I'm asked to go out there to look at, to do an inspection. We have certain inspections and for finished grading, and they gave me an as-built because I'm sure they thought they were done, and it's different.
Right.
So, you know, and I've sent emails saying, who authorized the changes? And I get radio silence. So.
This is for the pool.
Yeah, they changed the pavement around it, they said they were gonna grade out, and now it's basically a boulder wall. It's boulder sloping down, you know, and it was drainage, they took out a flared end. Well, you know, you've changed things. So, you know, I'm getting tired of people changing stuff that they don't seek permission.
Right.
I mean, generally, we're gonna give you permission, but we wanna make sure it's gonna work.
Right.
So you're not gonna flood your neighbor. So Patty and I had a meeting today with on 7 New Driftway. As Mr. Barry said, he has put in he has a PNS on the property, and he's gonna be coming in with a new development.
What's the thought process of what kind of development?
It's gonna be a multifamily. Basically,
Multifamily as high as they can make it.
it's gonna be by right, so it's gonna be the maximum density for by right, so they don't have to give anything extra.
It's gonna meet water resource protection district requirements and all that.
So this is what they.
Because it sits right on the.
Yeah, this is what predicated
I
here.
mean, this has always been the issue, that's.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's a pretty sensitive site.
It's a very sensitive site, and it's very similar to the uphill one of 18 to 20 Country Way. So, you know, so
How many units are they allowed by right?
18.
And the initial was 19.
It was 14 on-site, 5
5
off-site. So, you know, I went over the basic thresholds.
Wait. This was, are you talking about where the doctor's office is?
Yes,
Yeah,
Is he gonna change it?
yeah,
He's going to try to, he wants to reuse the existing building, because he says, I mean, but he got the whole inside, But he says it's structurally very, very sound.
Better than what you can build
So
on.
he's, so we,
So that way
so
you're
he's
gonna
gonna
change it.
we're gonna re-permit this whole.
Yes, you're
Now,
gonna-
what, it's a whole lot, a whole grid.
You were gonna have to do a modification at a minimum anyways, because the Affordable Housing Trust pulled the land for the affordable units. So
Right, those were gonna be
They
offsite.
can they can get more density under this new bylaw than they could under the old bylaw,
And
They
he,
have affordability requirements there.
10%. So 2 affordable units.
and he was well aware that he was gonna have to submit a new plan, he said that to us.
That's right, I mean,
He
because they
wasn't
get,
gonna
they
give
get
her
more density.
modification. He had a new plan.
I just wanna make sure, sorry.
So this is gonna be coming down the pike as well.
Mhm.
So just, just trying to keep you updated.
What about Tedeschi property, anything like that?
Awesome.
Are we all set? Yeah, I'll make a motion to, adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.